So Bob just excellent. So for those of you, I know some of you all know me here. For those of you that don't know me, my path's been a little bit different than John's path, though I did work in Nashville and Newport News, Nashville, Tennessee, and Newport News, Virginia, in the public service, welfare, food stamps departments. Oh, we have one more person coming on. Welcome.
Hello, Elise. Welcome.
But so I have a little bit of experience there, but my main growing up in advocacy has been in criminal justice reform. Gay, McGinnis, Bob, Chuck, I've worked closely with you guys on solitary confinement and some other issues as well. And for if you haven't heard, there was in the budget that got passed today money to start an ombudsman's office. So very excited about that. I spoke with Delegate Hope a little bit earlier today, and he said we got our foot in the door. So and that was one of SALT's priorities under John as well. So we have our foot in the door on that. But I don't want to limit SALT to either what my experience has been or necessarily to how John crafted SALT. I want us to look and say, how can we take SALT into this next era? How can we move SALT forward? And this is basically a chance for Bob and I to hear from what you guys think and what you all think are the possibilities going forward. You all, I don't know all of you personally, but I know all of you have been active in SALT's work and in SALT's advocacy in one way or the other. So I would just love to hear from each of you. Bob and I would love to hear from each of you about what you think the good parts of SALT are that we should keep, and how should we navigate this path forward?
Hey, David, before we go, could we allow everyone to introduce themselves and maybe mention their connection to SALT?
Good idea. Good idea.
Yeah.
Joanne, why don't you start off? You're at the top of my screen.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Joanne Duggan, and I work as the Director of Outreach at St. John Neumann Catholic Church. We're in Reston, and we've been involved with SALT, particularly with the solitary confinement issue. It's, you know, we couldn't take on everything, but that was one of the issues, prison reform, solitary confinement, that our church has been behind, working with SALT on that.
All right, thank you, Joanne. David,
you're sure. Hi, everyone. I'm David Balducci. I am retired from the U.S. Department of Labor, and I met John and Bob at a conference about 10 years ago. And I'm a national expert in unemployment insurance, and I mentioned something about compensated work sharing, and John Horsch had the foresight to pick it up right away. And the next thing you know, for 3 years, Bob and John and I would go down to Richmond and go through the halls and try to get people converted on that. And we did a pretty good job. We got it in the bill. We got a bill in and enacted in law, except it had a sunset provision. So we had to wait a couple more years, and then it's in permanently in the state's unemployment insurance law. So that's how I've been introduced to SALT and had a enjoyable time. And I see Elise there. I remember Elise from some years back. Hi.
All right, thank you, David. And Elise, since David just gave you that shout out, let's hop over to you now.
Well, thank you. And thanks for the introduction. I recognize a few of the people on here, and it's really great to see you all. My name is Elise Cleva, and I met John and became connected to SALT when I worked at St. Charles Catholic Church in Arlington. At that time, I was one of 2 social justice staff at St. Charles. The other was Joanne, who's also on this call. My job was advocacy and international outreach programming, and her job was domestic social services, and we worked together. I now work for Arlington County for the planning and housing divisions. And the housing division is it's mainly the policy side of creating and preserving affordable housing in a very expensive area. And I'm happy to be here. And I live in Arlington as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. McGinnis, can you go next?
Sure. I'm McGinnis Williams. I was a criminal defense attorney for many years, and I was part of the Virginia Coalition on Solitary Confinement and was the chair after David and before David after Gay. So I know David and Gay very well these last couple of years, and Bob was always there, Bob and John, adding gravitas and lots of great ideas. I fell in love with both of them. So I'm here mainly because Bob asked me to be here. I would do anything he would ask me to do. And of course, David, I'm very close to. So I'm glad to meet all of you and glad to be here.
Thank you, McGinnis. All right, Gay, since you got a shout out there, I'm going to go to you next.
Okay, I'm Gay Gardner, and I got acquainted with SALT and participated in SALT activities through my church, Little River United Church of Christ in Annandale. And I was very involved in the creation of Interfaith Action for Human Rights and the larger Virginia Coalition on Solitary Confinement. I remember meeting Joanne at an event I participated in with Kimberly Snodgrass, and I think John was there as well. So that's my story. Good to see everyone.
Now, I know Gay personally, so I know she left a lot out of her story. Thank you so much, Gay, for sharing that. And Chuck, you are going to finish us off for intros.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name's Chuck Mayer. I met John about 5 years ago when I was just getting started in advocacy, looking at a better pathway to access IDs for people in Virginia jails. And since then worked with him on a number of issues like private prisons, prison communications costs, oversight, and a bunch of other criminal justice reform issues. Worked closely with David and Bob and with McGinnis. So happy to be here and talk through what's next for SALT.
All right, thank you. So to frame our discussion for what's next, I would like to hear from you guys. Now, you don't have to share every time I ask a question, but if you feel moved, you can raise your hand, either physically or with the icons. But I want to start off by looking to the past and really thinking about what has SALT done best? What has really set SALT apart from other organizations? And Bob, you're allowed to answer these questions too.
I'll start off.
Well, okay, David and then Chuck. Okay, go ahead, David.
I remember talking to several legislatures and recently, and it was something that was told to me that might be a way to kick this off. Generally speaking, legislators could rely on the information that SALT provided, that it was accurate information, it was vetted, and there was data behind it. And I was told that, and I thought, that's right. That's why SALT has had a good reputation, and I would hope that would continue in the future. But that takes some time and digging and getting the right experts together and a focus. So I threw that out because it was told to me, and it might be helpful.
I think that's good. That is definitely, as someone who's worked for legislative offices before, you see advocacy groups and sometimes just say things without the stuff backing it up. And John and Bob always have reports and data to back stuff up. Chuck, what was on your mind? What are you thinking about?
Yeah, I always thought that three things really differentiated SALT in this social justice space in Virginia. The first one that I thought was really important was the fact that SALT was not only a nonprofit, it wasn't even really an official organization with any backing behind it beyond believing in the cause. And I think that that gave us a lot of credibility, because when we walked in the room and recommended a policy to a legislator, they knew that there was no ulterior motive. We were coming in to try and be a fair dealer and call it like we saw it. And I think that that allowed a lot of SALT victories to occur. I think the second thing that really differentiated us and helped us create those victories, where we were willing to literally talk to anyone and everyone. And even though we disagreed with their points of view, we were able to have a civil and respectful conversation with them. And basically no legislator was really off limits. If you thought that somebody might be receptive, or if they wouldn't, everyone would be spoken to. And I thought that was, again, helpful, because we didn't close any doors. And we showed that even if we couldn't get to an agreement with one legislator on an issue, it left the door open to compromise or to agree with them on a different issue. And I think the third thing, and this is really what stuck out to me, was just dedication over a period of many years. You know, when John didn't win on an issue, he didn't move on to a different issue the next year. He brought it back, and he brought it back, and he brought it back until we got a victory. And I would love to see that sort of dedication and determination continue, because I don't see it in a lot of other organizations, and people will move on when they think they get the easy wins, but we never get the big wins unless we're really willing to fight for them over a period of years.
Well stated.
Yeah, thank you, Chuck. McGinnis.
Yeah, I just want to underscore what David and what Chuck said. I mean, SALT was always the adult in the room at the in the coalition. I mean, sometimes representatives of organizations would kind of get emotional, and SALT was always steady Eddie, and as both David and Chuck said, very objective and relatable. And I think one of the gifts that SALT brings is when SALT partners with other organizations to help those organizations go where they're going, it's a real steady hand that participates. And I love that about SALT, and I know that that will stay.
Thank you, McGinnis. Anybody else have anything they want to share about what they think sets SALT apart? What they think sets SALT apart? Got to get my S's in the right spot. Yeah, Joanne, go ahead. You're on mute. You're muted right now, Joanne. There you go.
Sorry. When I have spoken to my pastor or other people about SALT and why we support them. We have a Catholic group, the Virginia Catholic Conference, but I always felt like SALT was taking on the issues for those that are forgotten. The people in the prisons, the single mothers, or and so I used to state that John always seemed to be fighting for the least among us, which some organizations don't do, and he did it so well. So I would say that those that are often forgotten and left behind and don't have a voice, he was a voice for them.
And Elise.
So I agree with everything that's been said previously. In between where I am now and St. Charles, I spent a year working for a legislator in the General Assembly, and I do remember hearing people say that they trusted John and SALT's fact sheets even greater than what was coming out of it's kind of like a research office that the General Assembly has for bill writing. And to kind of piggyback off of what Joanne said, I think another thing that it has strengthened SALT is not dipping into issues that are more personal morality oriented. That's something that really distinguishes SALT from the Virginia Catholic Conference. SALT is not active on spaces like reproductive rights. And I think that's a very good thing, that leaves room for focusing and in-depth work on issues that there aren't other organizations devoted completely to, if that makes sense. So that's something I would really like to see continue about SALT.
So what I'm hearing you say is, one of the things that sets SALT apart is staying away from the more morality driven issues and focusing instead on really those human care issues.
Yes.
Okay. So all right, cool. Yeah. All right. Anyone else want to add something in for this part of the discussion? Okay.
I just had one more thought, and I guess it was listening to everyone, because I don't know everyone here, here, but I always liked the informality of, it wasn't sort of it didn't lean on organizing everyone. Everyone came to it, and you felt part of SALT, not because you had some level of dues, either financial or other obligation, but you did it because it was an informal organization. I think, Bob, they always talked about there were something like 1,200 people in your mailing list right now, and that was good because you didn't know all of them, but they could all sort of letter write in campaigns and things like that. So there's a certain degree of, I think Charles said it was, came to it because you were driven to it without a formal organization. So
Yeah. Welcome, Barry Patton.
Hi, thank you.
Good to see you. If I could add something, David, myself, one of the things I'd like to throw out to everyone, if you don't mind, David, is that one of the things we worked on, we developed the SALT communication system with the person we work with, our IS&T expert. And before, we just sent out things through our own email. Sometimes John couldn't get his email to work, so I would send it out, communication. Finally, we got the system to work. And we also have an advocacy tool in there, which we're very happy with. It is set up so advocates can go there and send a letter to legislators or whoever we want to send them to. We can make it go beyond just state legislators. One of the problems we have, and we would usually write a sample letter and tell people you could send this, but we also invited people to add their own 2 cents. What do they want to say about this issue? And then send that to the legislators. One of the problems was getting people to respond and send letters. Although we had 1,200 on the mailing list, we were very lucky to get 100 letters. Although we were happy to get the 100 letters, and we know that caught the attention of legislators. They got that many letters. I think one legislator said if she gets 10 letters regarding an issue, she starts paying attention to it. But we very seldom ever got any more than, I'd say, 75 or 100. And I would be interested in your ideas. How do we use that tool more effectively? We usually send out one letter inviting them to click a link, and that would take them to the advocacy letter. Sometimes I send it out twice. John and I would work on the various letters. I was the person that made sure all the letters went out and also counted how many people gave responses. But if you have any ideas on that, maybe you don't have now, but how do we get people's attention again? Do we need to send it out twice, maybe sometimes 3 times, or is there something to make the letter more make it catchy that would suck people into it, take action? I don't know. And I was always puzzled with it. John was less disappointed than I was about the response. But anyway, it always bothered me. We had 1,200 people, but very few actually took any action.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Bob. Gabe, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I would say send it out at least 3 times. Send it once and they have a different heading on it each time, and then say it's getting closer to the vote, it's urgent to respond, and then again and say the vote is Tuesday, you must respond by tomorrow. Get it, tell them the deadline's approaching. Do it now.
Yeah.
And it takes that much for me to do anything. I would assume it's the same for other people.
Yeah.
Good point, Mary. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a good point, Mary. Thank you.
Gage, did you have something to add?
I was having some difficulty getting my hand raise function to work. It's different from what I'm used to, but I can't seem to get it to work. But so I don't know how you recognized me.
Start waving your hands around. We'll see it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm afraid I don't have, I think, Mary's comments are all good. I wish I had an answer to that, because that's a dilemma that all organizations face, I think. I mean, I get, and you all probably do too, inundated, flooded with emails from lots of different organizations asking me to do something. And I actually like the SALT messages, the way they're constructed. I think they're very substantive, but they're very concise, and you make it easy to do what's being asked. So honestly, I'll have to give it more thought, but it's hard for me right now to think of a way to improve it. It's just, so many, we're always at risk of compassion fatigue. There are so many important issues to take action on, and it's easy to just, for people who care, to get overwhelmed with all the requests.
Yeah. No, I very much agree with you, Kate. And I think all of us gets probably too many emails we just can't get to. We'd like to respond, but we can't get to all of them. And I think maybe what Mary said about sending it out several times might be the clue. And thanks for your compliments on the letters that went out. We appreciate that.
Yeah, but I think you and I can definitely work on some really almost like an A/B testing with this next session to see how people respond to different calls to action. So I think there's some good options there. By the way, Mary, you didn't get a chance to introduce yourself to everybody earlier. Can you
Yeah, I'm sorry, it was a little late. I'm Mary Payton. I'm the Housing Committee Chair at NAACP, and I run an advocacy group called South County Task Force in the Route 1 corridor. And we work mainly on poverty and housing issues, mainly at the county level.
Wonderful.
But I've been a fan of John's for a long time. He was an inspiration to me, and I've connected with him over the years.
Wonderful. Thank you for your work, and thanks for sharing. Chuck, I see your hands up. Next.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's sort of two other opportunities, especially sort of building on the previous point that SALT's data is trusted. So I think one easy, clear opportunity would be to create some sort of social media account for SALT so that we can spread out these facts to a wider audience. I think a lot of the things that are within the SALT fact sheets would lend themselves pretty easily to being broken out into things like Instagram posts and Twitter threads, and it would help us engage with a younger, socially conscious audience. And then sort of going in the opposite direction, I think there's an opportunity, if bandwidth permits, for us to build some of these fact sheets out into longer reports and release them sort of as more formal documents. Obviously, the fact sheets are 1 to 2 pages targeting legislators, but a report can be much more helpful if we're trying to generate press interest. And press interest is another way, if we can get some of these facts in the press, to place pressure on legislators to create change. So those are just 2 thoughts for trying to increase engagement using different venues.
Yeah, good points, Chuck. One thing we tried to do with the fact sheets is also put links in there to the source and for more information. And I think, we really tried to work on that. And I think it's a good idea. We just spent a lot of time on fact sheets. Spent a lot of time researching and trying to gather the facts and try to not overwhelm people with them. So we used a lot of links, but to take people further for those who wanted to read more. But thank Instagram and Twitter. We do have a Facebook page. I'm not for sure. Looking at the hits, I don't see that a lot of people go to it though. Seems like a lot of people go to our web page. There seems to be a lot of hits on that.
I think that's definitely one of those things that if we build it out, it will attract a larger audience. And Chuck, I like what you said about expanding out the some of those fact sheets. I worked with McGinnis and Gay before last session on a big report on solitary confinement, and it was a huge lift. We had a lot of people working on it, but that was one of the things that really moved the needle amongst people that have been on the fence or had not been supporting solitary confinement reform, was seeing all the data that we had laid out. And part of that data did come from SALT fact sheets, just expanded out into bigger form. So I think there is definitely the ability to target in some very specific places those longer build outs to really generate that interest, as well as take it to that next level with the legislators. Okay.
Elise had her hand up.
Elise, go ahead, please.
Elise, go.
I have a couple of questions, and I know I apologize. I was a little late, so I apologize if they've been covered. Okay, one is, what is SALT's current budget?
We've got a few $1,000s in the bank right now. And I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. I think there's still a little bit more coming in. Let me take a step back actually on that point. SALT was founded so long ago in a time far, far away before September 11th and banking regulations, that somehow John had been able to get a bank account for SALT without SALT actually having any corporate existence, any legal existence. So what we are doing right now is I have my LLC in Thrive Advocacy Solutions, and I've opened up a separate bank account under the Thrive LLC legal entity, which is just being used for SALT funds. It's a separate account. It's partitioned off. There's no cross using of funds. I keep an accounting of everything. Bob gets to see the report every time the statements come out, stuff like that. So we've got a few $1,000s in there right now. But this is one of those questions, one of those bigger questions we're looking at going forward. How do we want to fund this? It takes money. We have started doing some work expanding SALT's message out into the rural conservative parts of Southwest Virginia. And each one of those events, it takes a few $100s of SALT's funds to help pull off with the other organizations we're participating with. So that is definitely something we are looking in there. But does that answer your question, or does that give you more info than you wanted?
No, that answers my question. And my other question was, like, basically, what are the human resources? This is the first time I'm meeting you. How much time are you able to give SALT? And I guess for everyone here on the call, like, if any of us are able to offer volunteer hours, how many? Because these two, like finding out your budget and finding out your human resources are, I think, really key when you start talking about planning what's next. So yeah.
Yeah, that's actually, let me, I like that question. Let me rephrase it a little bit. I think it's how I've been thinking of it in my mind is, what do you all, as the stakeholders in SALT, what do you want to see SALT going forward? I already heard one person mention they really like the informal nature of SALT. But while the informal nature of SALT is good and it draws people towards it, it also hinders our ability to fundraise, to be able to get more boots on the ground, to be able to do more work with legislators. Everything, I mean, things cost money. So, and I'm saying right now, we are not a 501c4, 501c3, any type of entity. So, yeah, Chuck is laughing at that one. Yeah, that's how I felt when I found that out from John. So
yeah, I asked John about it when I was first getting involved. I was like, well, what is, do you have a nonprofit? He's like, no, we just do what's right. And I was like, okay.
So that's what I have for you guys. Let's look at this. Going forward, do we want to actually legitimize, create a legal entity for SALT, a nonprofit that we can actually have as SALT, that we can fundraise for, that we don't just have this stash of money set aside in a partitioned account, which I've got an agreement signed with Bob and John for a whole fiduciary thing. But do we actually want to create SALT as its own entity? Or do we want to kind of keep rolling as we've been rolling? Mary.
I'll give you a third option.
Yes.
Becoming a 501c3 or C4 involves a fair amount of paperwork and legal work and ongoing work to kind of keep it up and make reports. And South County Task Force is not a 501c3 or 4 either, but we get some donations and some dues. And we're what is legally called a club, which can open a bank account and have elected officers. And the elected officers change, but they're listed on the bank account. So it's an independent organization. It's not tied to a particular past officer or anybody else's account. And we can raise money for sure. It's just that people can't deduct it from their taxes. But the donations we get are pretty small, so I don't think that stops them from sending them in. And I would recommend SALT raise money around issues. You do some really good issue campaigns, and that would be what people would be likely to give to. And you might consider, a little bit of dues. I don't know what you get for the dues, because you do want to send the newsletter to everybody. But that's just another option. If you want, that could be an interim step, and then later on become a 501c4 probably, because you're going to lobby.
So this club, I've actually not heard of that. I mean, I assume that was one of the, I think I had some of that when I was in my high school years and college years, but I assumed all that went the way of the dinosaur after the banking regulations rewrite. But
no, it's mainly used by PTAs and sports groups associated with high schools and civic associations. I think it's a category of that allows you to get a bank account and be an entity. You get an ID number.
Yeah. Okay. David, I see your hands up there.
Well, I think, David Smith, you've asked a really good question. And I don't know whether that can be decided right now, but I'm glad you put it on the table because it takes some thought. And I was the one who raised the informality, the notion. And what I always remembered is something Mary said. I always remember John. He would go out and find people who were national experts on a particular topic, and they would join John in these particular efforts. That's how I got involved, and there was a certain spontaneity to that, a certain passion that you had to have in order to move forward on that. And I don't dismiss it in any way organizing in the way you've sort of laid out, David, what you're talking about. I think it's something to think through, but I kind of like Mary's idea right now as sort of a step in between those two, informal. I like that kind of idea. I just expressing my view, just thinking through it intellectually.
I talked to John some time ago, off and on, about that, and he didn't want to go through all the paperwork to make it a 501c organization. And there was a lot. He actually had looked into that even before I started working with John. And he just decided he didn't want to go that route.
I will look into this club idea. I didn't even know that was an option.
I didn't either. So
Yeah, got a good relationship with my bank down here, and see if they want to open up another account for me. It's been like account number 4 or 5 in the last couple of months for it. But yeah, I will look into it. I think that might be a very good next step. I mean, yes, I see you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I really like Mary's idea too. And as David was saying, the informality, that's something, but once you become one of these 501c3s, I'm not saying we should never do it, but then you've got this whole board and you've got these politics. Oh my God. If we can, until SALT knows where it wants to go, I think we would get ahead of ourselves if we created something like that.
And Chuck?
I think you might need bylaws to do that. I can't remember now. The bank account is in the name of the club, and then the elected officers are listed. And we did do bylaws. We had a kind of a formal statement of who we were. So anyway, when you check it out, but the bylaws are, they can be difficult, but they can be not. You can have interim bylaws and change them later as you grow.
Okay. And Chuck, what have you got?
Yeah, I like the idea of being a club, at least in the short term, or an association, because again, 501c3 is a permanent shift, or 501c4 is a permanent shift. And there's a lot to think through there. Again, not opposed to it, but I think it's the kind of thing that it takes a lot of preparation. So we should make sure that we do that before we jump into anything permanent. I think I'll just be the first one to say it. I will pay dues to SALT all day, whatever. Yeah, like that is something I'm absolutely willing to do. And I think if you ask around, a lot of people probably are. And if that's a way that we can generate revenue, I don't care if they're tax deductible. It's going to a good cause and something that I believe in. So wanted to be the first one to say that. And then secondly, if we do eventually want SALT to become a 501c something, I think one of the key things that we would have to discuss is what types of donations we'd be comfortable taking, especially if we want to preserve that essential essence, like what is SALT's core values and what are SALT's core, what's SALT's core mission and culture. I think we would have to really consider what kind of donations we'd be comfortable taking, or what kind of money we'd be comfortable taking to make sure that we preserve that. So just a thought for later on down the line. I'm sure there's plenty of those conversations ahead.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Chuck. I think we've got a good consensus around the idea of a club right now as far as structure for us going forward. But if I can direct the conversation now to a different topic, really the meat of what SALT does is advocacy, right? The research, the working with these legislators year in, year out. What I want us to think about now is, what do we see as SALT's priorities? Maybe some big picture like criminal justice, human care, welfare, families first, whatever we TANF, that's what we call it in Virginia, right? Medicaid, Medicare expansion, things like that, criminal justice, certain areas there. What do we see as our maybe big picture goals, as well as some maybe more direct goals for the 2024 session? I mean, it's already September right now, but we are in a big year of flux, so we're not behind the ball yet as far as advocacy goes. But just thinking about that big picture, little picture, what do we see as SALT's advocacy future?
Could you clarify that, David, a little bit? Are we talking about state-centric issues or federal issues?
Let's go both here, because I mean, my experience with John was on the state level, but looking at SALT's work, I know they worked on federal issues as well with our congressional delegation. So
let me interject here on federal. Did you get my note, David?
Mm-hmm, I did.
I sent you a note. What SALT is trying to do is try to support folks that tackle federal level issues. For example, we'll send out information from FRAC, Food Research and Action Center. we will publicize what they are advocating for. And that's one of the ways we try to deal with on the national level. We don't have in our system all the contacts for all the national legislators. We have contact for every state legislator. We can add contacts that we would be able to send letters to. But one of the reasons, I think John would have agreed with this, one of the reasons we looked to other organizations on national issues is because they had the advocacy tools. And we supported those. We were in solidarity with them. But take Network, for example, the group that made famous by Nuns on the Bus. They had issues. We even had them come to speak at some of our meetings. Before we off to Richmond in usually November, I think it was, or December, and also afterwards too. Like Sister Simone Campbell came several times, okay. But also the Bishops' Conference has a group, I forget what they call it. Hold on a minute, I'll tell you. It's the Department of Justice, Peace, and Human Development, and they touch on a lot of national and international issues. And they have a good advocacy tool that they use also. So if we're going to go, I think we need to support them, support, national issues, but I think we need to make sure that we might want to look at organizations we want to get more in solidarity with and support what they're doing, or suggest to them, this is what you support, and see if they will carry the ball there. Otherwise, we need to update our advocacy tool in the system and put in there all the national legislators, which can be done, but David, that's going to cost a little bit to get everyone in. I mean, it's just something to think about.
Yeah, we can look at options there. Mayor, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I'll just throw out what we did at the South County Task Force with this issue. We decided we would have a big group discussion to kind of solidify a group of issues that we were kind of generally supportive of. It was a larger group of issues. And then what that did, because we have members, so we could do that. And then what that did was it allowed the steering committee to take positions. I mean, we identified the positions we wanted to take on a whole bunch of different issues. And then the steering committee could take those positions as it became, as those issues came up somewhere. We didn't try to do everything all the time. We would then focus down to a smaller number of those issues, depending on kind of what was coming up in the legislature, what the opportunities were for getting any change, and we would focus in on those. So we had this kind of background group there all the time, and we'd revisit that maybe every couple of years to make some adjustments in it. But the strategic annual issues would be drawn from that, but would be a narrower group.
I like the way that works there. Yeah. Any other thoughts or ideas in this space?
This is Joanne. I would just say, I don't know. I thought the beauty of SALT was that it was a state, was advocating on a state level. I think, as Elise mentioned, what are the resources if SALT tries to take on too much without the resources in place? And the other thing is, I think people sometimes are inundated, and if SALT starts sending not only state issue information to people, and then they include national level information, it might be overwhelming for people to be getting all of these, updates or requests on both levels. It might, I don't know, it might hurt SALT. And that people say, oh my goodness, too much stuff in my inbox, I can't deal with this, and they'll just, beg off. But that's my thought. I think staying at the state level it's needed. It's SALT has done such good work at that level. Why? I think like Bob has stated, they advertise national issues and support them in some way, but trying to take them on, I would say it would just be a bit much.
Okay.
Yeah, we developed several years ago, and I sent you a copy of it. I think I sent one to John, what I call a social justice advocacy digest. And it lists a lot of organizations that their primary focus is not on the state level, the national level. And we tried to educate, just draw attention to what these other organizations are doing. But we've done no more than that. And also to make clear that SALT's been in solidarity with these groups, and what they support, we basically support also.
Thank you. Very good points. Chuck, I see your hands raised.
Yeah, I think for me, the question of getting involved in federal issues is always trying to balance the effort and the impact. And federal issues take so much more effort just to get in front of legislators that the impact is sort of reduced. And you think about what you could get done at the state level for a similar thing, for a similar level of effort, it is hard for me to say we should make that a permanent part of SALT's priorities. I think maybe as opportunities arise, we can have that discussion. But staying focused at the state level to me makes the most sense. And I also think thinking about SALT's larger goals, the two sort of, I don't have any specifics, but the two key program areas that SALT was always involved in from my perspective are criminal justice and then sort of that human care, TANF, Medicare policies. And I think whatever we do, we should try and keep that to be the core mission of SALT, because that's really one, what we have experience in and what we know. And two, it's that relatively non-controversial policy that we can get bipartisan across the political spectrum support for.
Chuck, I really appreciate your optimism that it's a nonpartisan issue that we can get respect for and support across the board. So
gotta stay hopeful. Gotta stay hopeful.
I'm right there with you, my friend. I want to be respectful for everybody's time. Oh, Gabe, were you raising your hand?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I mean, I agree with what's been said about maintaining the focus on state issues. I wanted to ask Bob if he could shed some light on how he and John and whoever else was involved went about deciding on priorities for SALT.
Yeah, normally John and I talked about it each year, and we would talk about them, and then I would usually work on the fact sheets and run them by John or someone else I knew was an expert on the issue. But I would try to do all the research on. He came up primarily with the big goals, especially with regard to TANF. Like for last year, we had 5 items related to TANF. And one of the big ones was increasing TANF benefits 10% each session. John was somewhat of an expert on TANF. And I think David has also have exposure there. We've worked with the Virginia Poverty Law Center in the past, and they have a lot of expertise. And I know John would want us to keep TANF on top, because as John frequently mentioned to me, he said, Bob, the legislators so often they're spending the TANF money for everything under the sun except for the families. Okay. So I don't know. Does that answer your question? But John and I would primarily do the heavy lifting each year on what the goals were. Of course, we rely on people with Chuck and David and talk to Gay and McGinnis and others, about issues and get their input. Especially on solitary confinement, we had 5 issues related to related to criminal justice. And solitary confinement wasn't only one, but as Chuck had mentioned earlier, we had the moratorium on private prisons, in profiteering on Virginia prisons, creating an office of Department of Corrections ombudsman, and increased access to SNAP, especially for those that have been incarcerated, you know. All of that's on the website. All of our fact sheets are on there, and probably some of them need to be updated, but ever so often we would go update the fact sheets, you know. It took time to research everything, but between the two of us, we did most of the heavy lifting on all of that.
Yeah, David.
I just
Did
want
that
to
answer your question, Gay, or did I miss it? Yeah, okay.
I just wanted to say I'm really glad we had that discussion though, because I think it was really fruitful. We ought to stay in the strong suit. The strong suit is state issues, and I think that's very important to sort of lay out. And I think David Smith, that was something you'd want us to talk through and to think through how we would get there, at least for right now. Everything changes in life, but right now, I think the sentiment is that we stay in our special place there.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm hearing, David. Thank you so much for summarizing that. So we've got a few minutes left. I want to address one more thing, bring up one more topic before we wrap up, and that is about, for lack of a better word, governance and oversight. This had been John's baby, John's creation, John's growing teenager, John's child that graduated from college and went on to achieve great things at work. But I want to make sure that we are creating something that is sustainable for the long term. And one of the ideas that Bob and I have tossed around, at least for an interim time period, is a council of advisors, a board of advisors. Nothing as formal as board of directors and such like that, but just a group of folks that are committed to SALT and want to see this organization continue to do the advocacy work that it's been doing under Bob and John's guidance for the last, many, many years. What do you all think about that? Do you think a board of advisors is a good idea, or do you think something else is a better idea? I am open to suggestions. This is all about getting everyone's feedback.
I think if we're going to go down the route of becoming a club, like Mary suggested, that would involve some elected positions, which would help provide some oversight. That being said, I love the idea of an informal board of advisors. I think that fits with what SALT's culture is and has been. I think a board of directors would be much too formal, and there's some risks there. So I think keeping it informal would be helpful. And then as we proceed down, I think the route of becoming a club, if that's what we want to do, or if that's the direction SALT chooses, then we need to talk about what positions would be elected and then clarify those roles. And that would really help us gain some insight into what oversight is then needed from the board of advisors to support those elected positions.
Very well thought out for right on the spot. I appreciate that, Chuck. David, go ahead.
I think a kitchen cabinet's a good idea. I think a kitchen cabinet right now is probably a really good idea. That would help sort of support you and Bob, and also stay true to the goals and objectives of SALT for right now.
Yeah, as David just mentioned, this is a right now thing. This is not setting anything in stone. This is just for us looking for the near-term future, how we best navigate. I see Gabe hopped in and I said, well, I agree with everybody. All right, thank you, Gabe. Anybody else have any thoughts or comments?
Well,
Yeah,
one comment on how to select that board. Just saying again what we did at South County Task Force. We don't have a board, but we have a steering committee, and we have individuals who are elected as officers and at-large members, and then those people appoint representatives of different local nonprofit organizations who are influential in our area and in line with our goals. And you could extend that to be experts, or whoever you want on the board of advisors, and we could change those people every so often, every couple of years, depending on the focus of our advocacy. So if we wanted to do more on tenant rights or something one year, we could pull in some people from that line of work. So yeah, just think about who's going to appoint the board, and you want them to be a guidance board, or they could also help with fundraising, I suppose, if that's what a real board does. But maybe a board of advisors could also give some tips on that.
Good points. Great thoughts there. Thank you, Mary. McGinnis, go ahead, please.
I like the idea of the council of advisors in the sense that the council members are colleagues, that it is that people who are committed to the thing and know each other too. And so the commitment is to SALT, but also to the collegial nature of it too. I just love that idea of a group of people believe in something and kind of believe in each other too. Just, I don't know how better to say that, but.
It's very well put. Thank you. Believe in something and believe in each other. Excellent. All right. Any other thoughts around that?
Yeah, David, I have a thought that we were talking, and I think when I heard Gay talking, I just thought all the work that Gay has done in communicating with the incarcerated. This is just something to throw out, and we can think about it for later. But I've often thought that powerful personal stories are very powerful, and maybe in some of our communications, or post them on our website, maybe some of the personal stories, whether it touches on the issue of poverty, not getting enough to eat, or incarcerated, or whatever. And the other thought is to maybe do a video occasionally of, say, yourself, David, if you want to put forth an idea that we're going to be advocating for whatever. And whenever we send out a newsletter regarding this or a call to action, we direct people to the video. We could do the same on the issues of criminal justice, using maybe some of the stories that Gay has pulled together. I know Chuck has also been involved with talking to people about issues, and probably some of the others in the call have done the same thing. But I think personal stories are very powerful, and I think if we could give some thought on how we can use those, how we can, maybe get some of those posted and call people's attention to it. It's more than just a fact sheet. We got this fact sheet, you read all these facts, it's fine. But here's the personal story of someone.
Yeah,
what they had to go through.
Yeah, that's how we may change those hearts, is with the personal stories.
Yeah.
And you got your hand raised.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, one more thing. It reminded me, we have on our steering committee at South County, we have two seats that are for people with lived experience. And those have to be community leaders, from the ground up. And sometimes that's hard to fill, but we've got them. And that might be something you want to think about for the advisory board, that you have people with lived experience and who've done some organizing along those lines in some of the areas that you're working in.
Excellent ideas. I don't know if this came up earlier when I was doing my brief introduction, but for those of you that don't know, I got so involved in solitary confinement because I spent 16 and a half months in solitary confinement in the Norfolk City Jail back from 2013 to 2015. So
there you go. Got them already.
Yeah, that's when I became politically active.
Right.
After that experience. It is a little bit past 8:15, which means it's getting close to my bedtime because I'm a morning person here. Is there anything anybody else wants to share before we wrap up tonight? All right. When you do think of something in the middle of the night, just shoot off an email. Bob, did you send out a group email for this? I can't remember. If you didn't send out a group email, then just send it out. Reply to Bob and myself on the emails that you got from us, so we can have that with our notes as well. We're going to go through and look at all this and really kind of think it through, and we'll be back with you guys probably next week. Actually, it might not be next week. I think I'm heading out of town in the middle of next week, if I remember right. But within the next week or two, with some steps going forward to see what you guys think about those, and really look at how we can continue to really put some concrete steps for SALT for these next steps as we move forward. All right. Bob, is there anything else you want to share?
No, just I think going forward, one of the things that we probably could share some work on is the is developing of fact sheets. Like I said, most of the time, John and I did most of the work on the fact sheets, and there are people out there probably smarter than we are, better at research than we are, that could help with that. So, give some thought to that if you feel like volunteering to doing any research for fact sheets. Okay. The only other thing is think about any other organizations that we ought to partner with, be in solidarity with. Ken Bobo's group, we've tried to publicize much of what they do. There's maybe some others also, as well as the Interfaith Action for Human Rights, of course. But just give some thought to that. So.
All right. There's some great weight in there, just those thoughts left by Bob. With that, I want to thank you all for your time tonight. This has been extremely productive. I've learned a lot. I thank you all so much for sharing about your experiences with SALT and with John. It's really helped me understand the bigger picture of what SALT, John, Bob have been able to do all these years that they've been working. So thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you so much for sharing your own experiences with other organizations and your hopes for SALT in the future. So I say next steps, Bob and I will be going over all this conversations from tonight and kind of hashing out a plan based on y'all's feedback. And we'll be sharing that with the group, saying probably I'd say within 2 weeks, because I think I'm heading out of town in about a week. So I don't want to, I don't want to overpromise. I'd rather overdeliver. So. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Good night,
Thanks.
everyone.
Thank you.
What can you do?
Thank you.
Thank you.